Do you feel safe? Do you feel safe? I live in New York, and something has happened that is as predictable as the sun rising tomorrow morning. New York City, once the safest big city in America, one of the world's major commercial, financial, and cultural centers, will revert to the crime-ridden days of the 1980s. Not just New York. Soon major cities near you will return to their troubled days of lawlessness. Whether you are right or left, believe me. Understand this. Lawlessness without police equals crime and murder. The safest big city, New York, is now regressing to the bygone days of graffiti, drugs, gangs, guns, murder, and mayhem. And you can thank one man, Warren Wilhelm Jr., known today as Bill de Blasio. This is the face of the return of crime. This is the face of the man who, without a doubt, is the most incompetent, inefficient, and inept mayor to darken the halls of Gracie Mansion. His response to the May 25 murder of George Floyd, like everyone else, was outrage. But his answer to the George Floyd murder was to let New York City burn. He cut the NYPD's budget by $1 billion. He supported a police reform bill that tied the hands of police with no training under these new restrictions, and he ordered stand-downs while crimes occurred across the city. But then again, he's always had a problem with the police. I said it 3 years ago. De Blasio's anti-cop sentiments are deep-rooted. In 2014, when 2 cops were assaulted and seriously injured on the Brooklyn Bridge as protesters chanted, "What do we want? Dead cops? When do we want them? Now?" He called the protesters throwing garbage cans and bottles at police peaceful protesters. He normalized police hatred, telling us that he told his son to be cautious of police. Now, as New York City devolves into chaos, de Blasio turns a blind eye. Macy's flagship store in Herald Square was looted by criminals, not protesters, criminals, breaking in with hammers and coming out with stolen goods. Arsonists and looters on Fifth Avenue hit and emptied Chanel, Gucci, Balmain. The universal question: where were the police? Where are the arrests? Where are the perp walks? I'll tell you. The police were given a stand down to not engage, and a minimal number of cops were deployed. The upshot? As cops stand down, criminals become emboldened. And as for you, taxes will clearly go up, not just for the cleanup, but because businesses can no longer afford, nor would they necessarily want to be in a city where they are not protected from crime. In fact, one high-end New York City store is suing for failing to stop the looting. The owner of that store says that after paying taxes, the city owed a duty to the stores to protect them. He says that the city had intelligence, but did nothing about it. He, like many New Yorkers, believes his taxes go to the NYPD and that the police were told to stand down. But the big stores were not the only stores. Looters stormed small businesses, many minority-owned. Many shuttered now for good because of the protesters. Now, since George Floyd's death, more than 700 police officers have retired from the NYPD, and the department is now limiting the number of how many can retire each week. Why? The police have a target on their backs, and they know it. They're being told to stand down, and they're not being given any guidance on the new law passed by the city council. I actually told you about a hero 2 weeks ago, a deputy inspector and precinct commander, ironically from the 46th precinct, known as the Alamo, who retired because he was not given any guidance as to how his officers should respond in light of the new limitations on their ability to arrest. The irony here is rich. The 46th precinct that he left, known as the Alamo, was dubbed in the 1980s as the most dangerous square mile in America. And the new rules restrict police actions regarding arrests and what part of a defendant's body they're allowed to touch. Picture this: 35,000 New York City police officers, each with a gun. Not one has been trained on how to effectuate an arrest under the new guidelines, where you can and cannot touch the perp, and police will face certain prosecution if the arrest is not made properly. De Blasio also disbanded the Anti-Crime Undercover Unit, which directs undercovers to areas where crime occurs pursuant to a CompStat, which is a colorblind pinpoint screen that identifies crime concentrations that help drive down the city's crime rate and literally revolutionize policing around the world. Now, no more stop, question, frisk. No more police concentration in those crime-ridden areas. And the ones most afraid? The minority community in the inner cities who live with crime day and night. You ask the Black and Hispanic clergy, they are terrified of what is to come. The cops that were protecting them are gone. They've been told to stand down. They can't engage. They can't touch suspects. And I've been told repeatedly now by NYPD cops that if a suspect resists, the cops will let them go because they haven't been trained on what to do in that circumstance. The rookie school has been canceled. Morale is down. And for many, the exit from the NYPD cannot come soon enough. But it gets even worse. Democrat de Blasio and his ilk are working together to defeat law enforcement totally. Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo, you remember him. The one who forced nursing homes to take corona-infected patients, thus leading to the deaths of the highest number of seniors in the country. He signs a bill giving everyone involved immunity. He's pushed for cash bail, or so-called bail reform, as a result of which most defendants are released as soon as the paperwork is done. Add New York City Democrat District Attorney Cy Vance to this trifecta. Vance pushed for all crime to have no cash bail. And in an inter-office memo, he instructed his assistant DAs to go soft or dismiss cases against protesters, and instead told his prosecutors to be proactive and build cases against the cops who arrested the protesters. These three Democrats create a recipe for a return of New York City to the crime-ridden 80s when the headlines looked like this. This one from this week doesn't look so different, does it? Consider this. For 40 years, New York City education and social services budget was more than half of the total city budget. The NYPD, previously at 8%, is now 5%. The correlation of defunding police and the increase in homicides is predictable. In fact, already homicides have skyrocketed. There is a 206% increase in shooting victims last week over the same week last year. And if you're not angry enough, take a listen to this.
This is a historic moment of change. We have to respect that, but also say to people, the kinds of gatherings we're used to, the parades, the fairs, we just can't have that while we're focusing on health right now.
Okay, but de Blasio exempted Black Lives Matter marches. He says they can continue despite the ban he put on all large events because, quote, this is a historic moment of change. Say what? Are you stupid? The rest of us can't work. We can't enjoy sports. We can't be with our friends because of coronavirus. But anyone marching for Black Lives Matter can protest in hordes? Is that because the virus won't affect them? I thought the black community was particularly vulnerable to the coronavirus. And what about all you guilt bullies, the ones who told us that if we go out that we're going to infect grandma? So is it okay for protesters to get grandma sick, but the rest of us can't? So, Bill, you've decided to take away my safety, my protection, my security, my business, and my liberty. I got news for you. You don't have that right. You took an oath to support the Constitution. And as a public official, the first order of government is the protection of its citizens. You don't have the right to tell the police to stand down and to violate the oath that they took. You don't have the right to tell cops who want to go out to protect and defend us that they're not allowed to exercise their authority. And I don't care what your Marxist, leftist, socialist comrades tell you. This is the United States of America. And in the United States of America, we outlaw crime and we pay police to support law and order. You, Mr. de Blasio, by not supporting law and order, are a menace to law-abiding, tax-paying residents of New York City. You are so out of sync with the rest of us and so far from the fundamental values upon which this country was founded that the best thing that can happen to you is that you be impeached and crawl back into your Marxist, leftist, socialist hole. And that's my open.